and welcome to Rewind Reviews, a podcast where we watch old movies that we remember and go, was that any good? Was that a thing? This week's thing, The Iron Giant. I chose this one. We sort of alternate choices. I'm joined by the brilliant Chris, who has watched this movie.
Thank you very much.
I assume, I don't actually think I asked this. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I don't remember. Have you seen this film before? Before watching it to review it for this podcast? I don't think I checked.
I knew what the Iron Giant looked like.
Oh yeah,
and that was literally
you're a big
all I
fan
knew.
of Ready Player One.
Well, yeah, Dan. More than Ready Player One, my friend. Space Jam: A New Legacy.
Of course, the Iron Giant is in Space Jam: A New Legacy, which you did for some reason, and I'm quoting here, have fun with.
Yeah, I did have a lot of fun with Space Jam.
Terrible, obnoxious movie.
Yeah, it's awful. I literally, that's it. Like, that is literally it. I didn't know. I knew what the Iron Giant looked like. I assumed it was sort of like a BFG style. I think I thought it was maybe older than it was. I had a real.
Yeah. Well, it's a period piece, isn't it? So I think that sort of sets it as a. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I just assumed it was older. I assumed there were sequels. I had a really fun moment watching it where I went, because I'm thinking like, to spoil it, one of my overriding things is, how did this not become a franchise? It's so ripe for it. But I was watching it going, oh man, like, you could do a cool, you don't need to do it, but you could do a cool live action version. And I literally went in my head watching it, because I went in, I didn't watch a trailer, I just went in cold in my head, because I assumed at first it was older. I'm watching it going, God, I mean, you could do a live action version and the giant would be voiced by like Vin Diesel or something. And then, like, did you actually think that? Yeah, I look it up after. I'm like, fucking hell, it is voiced by Vin Diesel.
That's the best thing that's ever happened on this podcast.
I was like, shit.
Oh god, a modern day version of this one, you'd have maybe Jennifer Aniston would do the mum's voice. Vin Diesel would provide the voice of the Iron Giant, because he's Grootesque. He's not far from Groot.
Exactly.
God damn, Chris.
I know.
That's so
I didn't
good.
know I didn't think it was Jennifer Aniston, but I was quite so. I think she like, it's some of, again, we'll get there. I think it's some of Jennifer Aniston's best work.
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah.
Anyway, so no, I went. This I would say is the blindest I've ever gone into a film on here.
Very good, and I think, like, remember last week when we were talking? Sometimes we do a thing where we'll like say, and the next movie is this, and then we'll talk at least a little bit about why we've made that choice and what's of interest to us, which sometimes can detract from the ability to do it truly blind. Because even if you've not seen the movie, you then have some context, just some, even if it's not a lot. But I think what happened last week was we were so distracted by chat about deciding what the trilogy would be, Pirates of the Caribbean, coming soon, that we cover this year. We actually didn't really discuss the Iron Giant at all. Like, we didn't say anything beyond that's what it was. So, with that in mind, my history of the film is that I saw it when I was a kid, really, really thoroughly enjoyed it, but kind of a little bit forgot about it. And over the years, the film has acquired a cult-like status of people who adore this film very, very, very much. So a couple of years ago, I rewatched it just before the Signature Edition came out, and was like blown away and just like, yeah, this is a fucking brilliant film. Like, childlike Dan enjoyed but relatively quickly dismissed the film as just like, I've seen that now. Does that make sense? There are probably a handful of films like that from your own youth where you kind of like, that was a good film, I enjoyed that, and then you didn't really think too much about it afterwards. You never really went back to it. But I remember being particularly blown away and impressed by it when I rewatched it a few years back. So it's interesting. Now the Signature Edition is out to sort of look at it with the two extra scenes, which I do think are needed and should have been there originally if budget and time had allotted. They would have been there. They're much more essential than I realised going into it. That's the version we've watched and we're reviewing today, which is only 2 minutes longer, 3 minutes longer by my research, but significant 2 to 3 minutes, which we'll talk about, because obviously from Chris's perspective, he has no idea which scenes were added and which scenes were part of the original theatrical release.
Oh no, I did see it was as part of my reading afterwards. I did see that,
Okay,
so I do
fair
know.
enough. Fair enough. So yeah, so I think 2 very essential scenes, but yeah, so I'm very interested there.
I'd agree.
Obviously, so we kind of know that adult Dan has watched and enjoyed this movie. You know, I think it was 2000 and I want to say like 2015, 2016. Like was when I last had the urge to crack this film out and really enjoyed it. That was just before the fucking signature edition, like 2 months. I feel like I watched it and then immediately found out they were doing a special remaster, and I was really annoyed I didn't just wait for that. But anyway, so yeah, that was September 2015. It looks like. So yeah, sometime in probably summer 2015, I watched the movie last. So yeah, we kind of have an idea that I enjoyed it. I'm very curious about you. I'm sensing positivity, but I don't know for sure. What are your overall sort of thoughts on the film now you've watched it?
I thought it was great. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was a really wonderful, self-contained story. I thought it had a lot of good action. I thought all the character stuff really worked.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lovely time watching it. I thought it was really, really strong. Like, really compelling. Like, draws people in, and just I just couldn't. I can't believe it wasn't a bigger success, and I can't believe it didn't spawn a franchise. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's there. Just I suppose to be fair, it's partly there because of the signature edition, with the extra scenes. But you know, I'm watching it going, just add an S, baby. That's all you need to do. like yes. It's right for the picking.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that, but yeah, you're right. that hadn't even occurred to me. But I think even with the original cut that doesn't include the hints at the wider world, you know, you still had the giant at the end, sort of still around. Like there's an easy sequel on the on the table. And we'll get to this. The only problem is that it was a massive fucking bomb in the box office. It gained its status years later through people growing up. It actually a little bit had the genuine version of what happened with the prequels, I think. Well, it's not fair to say that the prequels didn't have this genuinely, but obviously now Ewan McGregor, Hayden Christensen goes, well, you know, the people that we made the movie for have now grown up and their voices can be heard with the prequels. And I'm always just like, yeah, it doesn't stop everyone else from having not liked it, though. Just because children have nostalgia for it.
And also, it's you know what I mean? It's there's an element, like, and we'll talk about it if and when we get to those prequels, but like, there's an element of like, look, any voice talking about Star Wars online is a loud voice. Do you know what I mean? Like the general, if I was to survey everyone in my life that had seen the prequels, I'm willing to bet the majority of them would be negative on them.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think, you know, when those movies came out, the internet was a thing, but wasn't what it is today. Social media wasn't as widely accessible. You know, it was mostly film nerds and critics ranting about it. So it's easy to get, like, I think both versions of the debate on the prequels slightly skewed. I think the original debate on it didn't include the younger audience that it was made for, and I totally agree with that. And then the modern day discourse around those, you know, it's lots of very young people, very internet savvy, being very loud online about how great they were and how everyone missed it and didn't get it, which is really funny because seeing that shift happen as the last sort of 15 years has played out has been really interesting to see. To see from it going universally accepted that those movies were terrible to being like a hot button debate is fascinating.
Yeah. And I'd love to say to those people, if you can accept that everyone's wrong about the prequels, is it not also possible that everyone's wrong about The Last Jedi? All the people criticising that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm willing to bet.
They often are.
I'm willing to bet there's a Venn diagram of people angry at people's lack of respect for the prequels, equally angry at anyone who dares to like The Last Jedi. But
I can't wait for that.
Star Wars
to
really
turn
is a
around.
good. Star Wars really is a good metaphor for the internet in general, isn't it? You can, if you've got an opinion, you can find someone else that agrees with your opinion.
Agreed. And if you feel strongly about that opinion to the point where you're going to start a Kickstarter campaign to remake the fucking movie, well, then I guess 10 people might follow you on that journey. Thus proving that maybe they were some loud voices, but actually there weren't that many of them in the grand scheme of things. That movie made 1.5, was it 1.5 billion or something stupid like that? Like maybe it just made $1 billion. I can't remember actually. To be honest with you, let's find out.
And if you look at, and this will be the last comment on it before we get back to the Iron Giant, but if you look at something, I know it's not as big a franchise, but if you look at something like Indiana Jones, a movie, Indiana Jones 5, when that movie came out, everyone was saying it was bad, so a lot of people didn't bother seeing it in the cinema. Like, that's clearly not the case with The Last Jedi because of the money it made.
Yeah,
like,
it's 1.3. 1.3
like
billion.
it doesn't make 1.3 billion without people enjoying it, without people talking about it. Like it just doesn't. Like
yeah, 100%.
Anyway,
so Iron Giant, yeah. So I think history has been very kind to this film in that like it is now thought of as a classic, and I do think even at the time, to be fair, I don't think opinion changed on this movie. It's not like everyone at the time said it was a disposable piece of shite, and over the years people have. I think that the people who saw it at the time enjoyed it. The critics gave it good reviews. This was not a panned film. No one who saw this film disliked it. I just think not enough people saw it. Full stop. To create that sort of that cultural sort of accepted opinion on the thing. Certain movies step into sort of a status of, well, everyone likes that. That is just agreed amongst most. That's a great film. Like, you know what I mean? Even if there's that odd person that doesn't like it, that person has to accept that they're very, very much in the minority. Like, I'm trying to think of good examples. Like the original Star Wars, like the original Indiana Jones movies, like Pulp Fiction. These are just movies that are just universally understood to be great movies, right? Shawshank Redemption's another one. Like, no, you know what I mean? And even if you're that one oddity that doesn't care for that film, you accept that. And I feel like Iron Giant has now stepped into that realm now, where everyone just knows that was a great fucking movie. But the problem was, at the time, the only people who knew that were the handful of people who saw it, and it was really a very small number. So I think, it took years and everyone catching it later on video or DVD or whatever, and then the kids who grew up loving it as children growing up to really, become older and have their voices very much like we talked about with the prequels. And I think now the movie is pretty much just, I think is pretty much considered a classic. I mean, to talk about it more specifically, I think one of the biggest things that this movie gets absolutely right is the visuals. It was made in 1999, but it has a visual flair that really is of its time. It doesn't feel like a movie from the 50s, but it feels like a movie that's set there so strongly that it really does. It really does give those vibes, and it's hard to explain. I mean, the only thing I will say, I've never particularly loved that they used CG to make the giant and then give him like outlines to make him look like he's hand drawn when everything else is hand drawn. I always thought the Iron Giant looked a little bit wrong, but it kind of makes him look aliener than he already is, which is fine. But other than that, I think this movie is like visually stunning. Like every shot in this movie is so well thought out and so good to look at. Like that was certainly one of my original overriding thoughts. I don't know if you felt similarly.
Yeah, completely. Like, and that's why I think I've always assumed that it was an older movie. And when it started, I was like, oh, this can't be that old because, just visually it looks so good. And I'm aware. So, as I think Dan might have said, we to clarify, we watched the signature edition. So obviously that there's a benefit there in terms of how the animation looks. But I absolutely was like, oh shit, this is not as old as I thought it was. I in my head, I almost, had something that, if you'd have asked me, I'd have been like, I don't know, when was the BFG made? Sort of around that time, and yeah, and I think that's because maybe if I had have seen clips or footage, it feels so older. You just assume it's an older movie. I think aesthetically, like you say, they do a great job.
Yeah, because you're right. It does look like sort of pre, like. It looks like basically pre-Aladdin. Like it has a look that I would sort of describe as sort of 80s Disney, without being very Disney, but 80s Disney aesthetic to the film. I think, it really does. I suppose if you took a screenshot of it without context and just asked someone to analyze like the animation style and the choices, you would definitely think it looks more like a Rescuers or a Basil the Great Mouse Detective, or like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of something more other 80s Disney movies, animated ones. Because Beauty and the Beast is 80s, but like right at the end. But yeah, it definitely has that vibe in the way they've chosen to animate it, which I think is definitely to the movie's benefit. Because when this came out, 1999, we were 5 years removed from Toy Story at this point. The movie landscape for kids' films did not look like this anymore. That's for sure.
No.
In fact, what else came out in 1999? Let's compare. Stuart Little, Toy Story 2. What else? I'm trying to think. Like there was like another. Was there a Pixar movie? Toy Story 2 would have been the Pixar movie that year.
Do you think it obviously would talk more by the sounds of it about the box office success in the Triv, but I think this is a relevant part of the discussion. Do you think that aesthetic damaged the movie? Do you think compared to Toy Story 2, compared to Stuart Little, people didn't take to it right away because it seemed so old-fashioned?
Yeah, there might be something to that. I think there is an element of like kids do gravitate to the shiny new things, right? And because I remember when your Toy Stories and your Bugs Lives came out. Even as a kid, I kind of was like excited about the new computer animated movies, and less so about the classically animated ones. Because I mean, Disney had the same problem, didn't they? With what was it, Treasure Planet? Which is a really fun film that just flopped in the cinemas. When did Treasure Planet come out? Probably not far off, right, from this. Treasure Planet.
Like the Goofy movie must have been relatively near to this, wasn't it?
Good question. No, Goofy Movie was earlier than this by a couple of years. I think Goofy Movie was like 95, 96. So yeah, only 3 or 4 years. Yeah, Treasure Planet was 2002. And that was really one of the last gasps of this kind of animation, and it bombed in the box office. Although Treasure Planet, we should cover that at some day. Do you know the story behind Treasure Planet? It's the most tragic thing.
No.
So the guys who directed Treasure Planet, where are they? Where is their name? Directed by this guy, John Musker and Ron Clements. So they begged for years to make Treasure Planet. They're like, we've got this great idea, we really want to do it. It's Treasure Island, but it's in space. It's like it's our dream project. It's our magnum opus. We can't wait to do it. Disney were like, no, we're not going to give you the money for that yet. Make Basil the Great Mouse Detective. Okay. They make Basil the Great Mouse Detective. That's a reasonable hit. They're like, now can we do it? They're like, no, go make The Little Mermaid. So they made The Little Mermaid, and that's a big hit. And they're like, now can we do Treasure Planet? And then they were like, we're going to make you do Aladdin. So they do Aladdin. And then they're like, please, how many hits do we have to provide before you'll let us make our stupid Treasure Planet movie? And Disney were like, well, you just make Hercules first. Just Hercules. Just one more. So they make Hercules, and then they finally get to do Treasure Planet. Which by that point, it's 2002, and as we might be hinting at here, the conclusion we might be coming to is that in that time, hand-drawn or traditionally animated projects weren't doing so well, and then Treasure Planet was a massive flop, which is like fucking tragedy for these two guys who waited like nearly a decade and a half. Jesus, 1986 was Basil. And then right up until 2002 when they made it. So that movie needs to be seen to be believed. We need to go back, because that story is fucking nuts. I'd love to go see it.
Yeah, we need to check that out at some point for sure.
Yeah, because I'm not even sure I saw that one as a kid. Like, even I was like, no, I'm good. Obviously, I didn't know the backstory. And it looks beautiful. Every time I see screenshots, videos, but I don't think I've ever actually seen the whole thing. So yeah. Anyway, so you can tell that like we don't, other than just lathering praise on this movie, there's very little to talk about because we've gotten ourselves distracted more than a few times. So let's get into the nitty gritty then. The stuff that I think works the best in the film is the characterization. Every character in this movie feels so well realized with so little time, and I don't know how they do it. It's fucking magic. Do you have any idea how this works? Because like I cared about these people really quickly.
I think they just do really clever. Like no time is wasted. So for example, our introduction to what's the little boy's name?
Hogarth.
Hogarth, of course. Our introduction to Hogarth is the scene in the cafe where he's basically wanting a pet, and it's a squirrel or something, isn't it? And it causes havoc. And in that scene, which introduces us to three of the main characters, Hogarth, his mum, and Dean, is it the artist?
Yeah.
And
who I just found out his surname according to IMDb, Dean McCoppin. Good choice.
Good old Dean McCoffin. Basically, that scene is telling us so much about each of those characters. Yeah. It's telling that the mum is pulled in a million directions and clearly loves her son, but is exasperated by his boundless sort of energy. It tells us that he really wants company, that he doesn't resent that his mum has to work late and work, but he really wants a pet. He wants to make a connection with something. It tells us that Dean has... Well, actually, this is one of the added scenes, isn't it? Between Dean and his mum.
Yeah, that one's one of the two added scenes. Yeah. So their little interaction, which isn't actually attached to that scene. I think it comes a couple scenes later. That one gets inserted. Right. But that initial introduction is when he tries to help Hogarth. Even though what Hogarth is doing is silly, he does really try to help him get out of trouble by not immediately giving away the squirrel situation. And he fails, but he tries. And I think what we learn about him there is his willingness to be supportive of Hogarth and not dismissive of him just because he's a child. Which I think really does set up their relationship for the rest of the movie, right? Because without him being like that with Hogarth, then Hogarth doesn't feel comfortable enough to bring the giant to him.
So that's why I think it works so well. The scene is, on the surface, the scene is about a kid trying to get a squirrel as a pet, but in all of the action that surrounds it, we are ultimately finding out things that become important later on, that are relevant to the characters, are relevant to the themes of the film. And I think the characters are so well realised in this. Even the sort of the FBI agent who is sometimes almost a bit caricaturish,
so efficiently villainous. I wanted to punch him.
Yeah, but by the end you're just like, oh, this guy's a cock. Like, and you cannot. He almost doesn't get enough comeuppance. We almost need to see him. We need to see one of them's reading a paper by the statue that says FBI agent in prison for life or something like.
FBI agent hung in front of a crowd.
Yeah, because he lies about, he puts a kid in danger by lying about. Yeah, he doesn't.
That's the moment where life. I go like from absolute piece of shit, but his heart's in the right place. He's trying to protect people. He already thinks he is. To what an absolute monster is the moment when he says, "Oh, the Iron Giant just killed a kid," and gets the army to fight it. That's the moment I'm just like, you are now irredeemable. But it's interesting because I read in the trailer, I don't know if I actually put it in or not, that originally a lot of that character stuff was later in the movie, was spread out through the whole film. And what they realized was, by trying to get it all into one scene, if they could find a natural way to do that, they could get a lot of time back to expand on other ideas, add other fun scenes. I assume things like, they don't specify, but I assume that means scenes like when they go swimming, which I suppose you could argue is non-essential to the plot. It's a fun scene and it does a lot for the characters and the tone and all that stuff. And I wouldn't lose it for anything. But you could argue maybe a scene like that in a world where they've had to spread the character stuff more throughout, you don't maybe get as much time to do things like that, more fun, jaunty stuff, which I really enjoy, and is one of the things. So I think you're right, but there is a risk, I suppose, when you do something like that the scene feels expositional or heavy on like, my name is such a body, and this is my thing. Here's my deal. Let me tell you all about me. You know, this could feel, if poorly written, this would be. I mean, it would be an unbearable scene to watch. But because it's written so well, and the characters are so charming, and the circumstances, it isn't that they're all just sat around boringly telling each other their backstories. You know, they're letting the characters demonstrate who they are with their actions, not by saying it. And we talked about this before. My pet peeve is when a character tells you, and this is a pet peeve in real life as well as in movies, when someone tells you what kind of person they are. Show me. If you really are that kind of person, I'll figure that out because you'll behave that way. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just the kind of person who looks out for the little guy. Oh yeah. Well, I'll see some evidence of that over time. You don't need to tell me that. The fact you're telling me that tells me you're the kind of person who has an ego. Is what I'm actually learning.
Yeah.
You know, so instead of all the characters sort of verbally saying like, "Oh, Mom, I just want some friends." Well, no, Hogarth, I'm busy all the time because I work here. And that guy in the background's like, I can help you out, kid, because I'm the kind of guy that, you know, is accepting of children. You know, like you could have a horrible, horrible scene like that. But instead, because it all comes out in their choices, it's Dean's choice to help Hogarth that tells us the most about him, not what he's saying. You know, it's Hogarth's choice to want to befriend a squirrel tells us how lonely that kid is. You know, the situation is educating us on these characters, not the words, and that's how you get away with it not feeling exposition dumpy, I think. So actually, at the beginning of this, Chris, when I said I don't know how it works, I think we figured it out because I think that's exactly what it is. So 10 points to you.
Yeah, I think it's masterful, and I think the voice acting, like we hinted at earlier, is really strong as well in all the characters. Like you say, Hogarth isn't irritating. The FBI guy is comical, but also an utter prick at the end. And like I say, Jennifer Aniston, like when I found out it was Jennifer Aniston, I was like, oh yeah, no, it is Jennifer Aniston, but. It just didn't, especially like 1999 Jennifer Aniston, like, and it's also another reason why you're like, how is this film not bigger? You know, that's peak Friends. Like, that's what maybe not peak Friends is like, but season 5, like for me, I think in America, peak Friends was season 2, but I think in the UK, peak Friends was seasons 4 and 5. That feels like when it was biggest here, but everyone always talks in you know, like in the book about it after the show ended, people talk about season 2 being the peak. I'm veering off.
I feel like in the UK season 4 was the peak. I feel like the excitement leading up to the London episodes and the wedding.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. For UK 4, 5, but people talk about in the US it being 2.
I think it took a little longer to really to take off in the same way here. I think it took a couple seasons, more so than it did in the States.
I'm just. Those VHSs, man, I'm just picturing and they changed the format of the front cover for season 3. Anyway, so I think I reckon I could even. We don't have time for this game. We don't have time for the game. Never mind.
Yeah, but I'm now curious as to what the game is. What's the game?
Season 5. I don't know if I could do it for all of them. Season 5, the cover of the VHSs, the band in the top that said Friends were each a different colour. I reckon I could guess what colour each volume was. So there were 6 volumes. I don't know if you quickly want to look up Friends Season 5 VHS UK covers and see if it's there. But I'm doing it.
I mean, look, at this point, it is one of those things. It's just what it is. This is what we offered, right? So let me clarify because, look, this is so annoying. I hated when they did this because it was the spines were black and white for the first few seasons, and then in 1 second, I'm just zooming in on an image that someone's put up. Oh, this looks like it actually doesn't change until season 7.
Yeah. No, it was just the front, the band at the very top of the front cover that included the Friends logo was a different, and I think the bottom band that included, season 5, volume 1 or whatever.
Yeah, you're
were
right. You're
different
exactly right.
colours.
But this picture isn't high quality enough.
So-
Let me 1 second. Oh, here we go. This one is. This one is. Come on. See, okay. Okay. So I've got season 5's colours. Go on.
Okay, so I think volume 1 was blue,
Yep.
volume 2 was green,
Yeah.
volume 3 was red.
Yeah, it's a weird shade of red actually. I've never noticed it before. It's like a maroon, but yeah, red. It's red for sure. You're right. That's amazing.
And then this is where I get hazy. So I reckon volume 6 is like a light green, like a neon.
Is volume
green.
6? Do you mean the last one?
The last one, yeah.
Yeah, it is. You're right. So you're
And then-
struggling with the 2 volumes between.
Well, I think they're purple and orange, and I think they go in that order. I think 4 is
So you've got
purple,
everything right
5 is
except for your
orange.
purple one. So basically, the root is indeed blue, like a green, then the red/maroon, then a light blue, then orange, then green.
Right. Okay.
So that
Yeah,
that
no, I
light
can-
blue
oh,
was
yeah.
the one you
I
thought
can
was a
picture it
purple.
now.
But I can sort of see why,
Sort of-
because the red from the one before it is such a weird shade of red. Like it feels like it's a fraction away from purple anyway. So I'm wondering if something has played out. But that's very funny.
I'm gonna look it up now. Yeah, there you go. Oh, I can see. Oh, the spines. Yeah, I can see why you're looking at the spines. Anyway,
Yeah, the spines.
so the voice
spines,
acting's
the
great.
spines also have the colours, which is fun.
yeah. I've just seen.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, God, this is the weirdest thing we've ever done. This is one of the weirder, least interesting tangents. So I'm gonna, even though I
Well,
was the one who was
except
like, "Yeah,
for that-
let's do it."
Except for that Venn diagram of Iron Giant and Friends fans,
Yeah.
who just loved that.
But yeah, no, you're right. With Jennifer Aniston in the cast, though, you do feel like the movie should have done better than it did. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway,
for
so
sure.
I think like, go on.
I was just saying the voice cast, brilliant,
Yes.
all the way through, including Vin Diesel, like doing a wonderful
Yes.
job.
Yeah, he's very good at this. He's very this. They found it's a weird niche of large, lovable, wordless character, but mostly wordless character, where you've got to communicate in a lot of like grunts or in very few phrases. I don't know why that's in his wheelhouse, but apparently it is. I do draw a bit of a weird parallel between Groot and the Giant. I think there's something.
Yeah, I think that's valid.
There's something weirdly sweet about both of the characters in a way that is like very charming and likable, but like you can't really pinpoint it. But yeah, no, I agree. The cast are great, everyone top to bottom. And I think it's the hardest sell. I do actually think is Kent Mansley. He's got the actor Christopher McDonald voiced Kent Mansley. He had such a hard line to walk because he's the sort of character that when he first shows up, he is a bit kind of sweet talking and like, trying to get what he wants by manipulation, but then like, turns on a dime when he doesn't get his way. That's a very fine line to walk. Then he has to walk that line of like, this is not a good person. He's going about this the wrong way, but we understand his motives. It's a very, very common trope for villains. But to perform that is quite tricky, I think, because you've got to sell us on his belief in the whatever the morality or the goal is, right? So you really believe that he genuinely is concerned that this giant is a threat to national security. But then he has to play the switch towards the end of the movie when you realize, actually, this is a more selfish character than we realized. And actually, he's more worried about his career than the reality of it, to the point where he'd rather they blow up a harmless robot and he can go, I did that, than actually get the truth. If this guy was like a police officer, he'd be happy to put the wrong guy behind bars just to say he got the fucking catch. That's the kind of character you realize he is as the movie goes on. But he has to sell us on that shift. Like, I have to believe all of those things sometimes simultaneously about this character. And I think, his slight descent into madness as he continually gets outsmarted by Hogarth is also delightful to watch. And of course, the animation brings a huge amount of life to all of these characters. They're all drawn so expressively. but I do, yeah, I really want to give a shout out to Christopher McDonald, because I do think he did a really great job here, particularly. I think it's a wonderful performance. But everyone's great, as we've already said. But that performance particularly stuck out to me.
Let's talk about the extra, because I think it adds so much to the signature version. So the scene in the cafe adds just that little to, like, I was already rooting for them as a couple just from that scene. I'm like, I'm in, I'm there.
Interesting, because that was going to be my question for you. Was I'm not sure their relationship is anywhere near as good without the signature edition, because I feel like in the past when I've seen this, I've gone, well, that was a bit quick and convenient. Two characters that barely interact. There's only one or two brief moments between them. And then at the end, they're just sort of together, and then we're supposed to just accept that. And admittedly, the one or two moments are sweet. Like her liking his art when she visits is lovely. And that's in the original edition. So it's not that it's not there, but it's way thinner without the scene that we get in the signature edition, which is them two talking in the cafe. So I was very curious to ask your opinion on that. Do you think that scene is essential or not?
Yeah, I think it is essential, because it just helps to build that earlier. It helps to build it without the complication of, you know, the big iron giant or the relationship with the sun. Like, it helps to show there is a connection and a spark and a bit of a flirt between them two, regardless of anything else that's going on.
I just love, even though it makes perfect sense in context, the sentence, you know, a love story without the complication of an iron giant. That just as a sentence is amazing. Yeah, I agree. And I'd like to think that no matter what played out, those two would have ended up together. That was kind of like destined to happen. But that scene really feels essential. It's just like the missing step. Because it's so funny. Very rarely, we talk about this a lot, where we go like, oh, this could have just needed just one scene to just push it to where we're, you know, content with it. And we talk about it with love stories. We also talk about it in the context of other things, you know, like character relationships, where we go, oh, I just needed one extra scene to believe them going from A to C. I needed B. Just the one thing. And this movie got it. Like, this movie didn't have that scene and then got that scene. And it really does... It sort of, like, proves that sometimes a small scene can do an awful lot. It's a very short scene. It's a very short scene, but it really does sell you on their relationship in a way the original movie didn't. I feel in the original movie it really does feel like, well, a lot of that happened off camera. Whereas I much enjoy this, where I feel like the start of their warmth to each other is much earlier in the thing, and it really fills that gap in. So yeah, it's I feel somewhat vindicated for previous, you know, occasions we've said that, where I've gone like, well, who are we to fucking say what the movie needs? Just on the grounds of, on this occasion, it did definitely work. As someone who's seen both of the cuts and had that feeling of, it's the only, because honestly, my only criticism the last time I watched this movie, and it wasn't even a criticism, was that they get together a bit out of nowhere towards the end.
I think, but like you say, that extra scene bridges that gap somewhat.
So what about the other scene then? Tell me, how do you feel about the other scene? Because I assume you watched it without knowing that was extra, and assumed, I think fairly, that that's such an essential piece of information that it was there from the off.
Because it sets up that he's programmed to be that way. Like before, because without that scene, presumably, the first sort of hint you get of that stuff is when he shoots Hogarth, which isn't, you know, wouldn't be ideal. Whereas that sets up, oh well, he's from a nation, he's from an army, literally programmed to do this. Don't get me wrong, I think you do slightly go, there is an element of, you wonder, is that where this is going? Is this going to be, you know, an army of these people descend to Earth and he has to stop them? And you know what we get is so much better than that. Yeah. But I think that it establishes that you need that. Like, so for those that haven't seen the signature edition but have seen the original, there's a scene where the giant is essentially dreaming, and that dream interferes with the aerial, the signal for Dean's television, and he isn't. I think the idea is you're not sure whether he's asleep, whether he actually sees it, but basically visuals of planets getting destroyed and a whole army of giants marching across, you know, burning planets and shooting things. We see flashes of these things basically, and I think it just absolutely sets up that, you know, sets up the program he's fighting against before we then see that in action, and it sort of builds it. It's like, oh shit, that's inside of him. He's capable of this. And then there's even more jeopardy. Yeah, there's more jeopardy and weight to the scene where it happens with Hogarth.
Now that's interesting because obviously, having seen the original cut, I definitely came out away from the original cut when I first watched it, because I first watched it as a kid. So when I first watched it as an adult, which again I think we said it's about 2015 when the scene tradition came out, I didn't feel that scene was missing. Like I didn't come away going, oh, they didn't set that up properly. Because the scene with Hogarth with the gun it played more as a surprise. So rather than the movie playing with like, oh, there's tension, there's build up, because we know that that's inside of him. Instead, it was like a really shocking moment in the original cut, and then you figure it out as Dean does, because Dean has a line where he says, "I think he's just reacting to your gun." You never quite find out that he is literally basically a walking gun, but you know that whatever he was built for, whatever he's from, you understand that he was programmed to defend himself at the very least, and therefore attacking him results in that. And because you get that, that's almost enough, or at least it was in my original viewing. But I will say, I think I prefer it this way. I think the signature edition is the optimal way to watch the Iron Giant, because I think that scene does give it more character and colour, but I don't think it was a problem in the original cut that it wasn't there. It's improved it, but I don't think it was as essential as the other scene.
Yeah, it would have all, everything would have made sense. And like I say, there is arguably, I think, have the scene, like you say, I think it's the optimal way of viewing it, but I think also in a modern context, in a modern world, it does make you think that, it's amazing. It's almost there for franchise building, or it makes you think that the ending is going to be this huge thing. Like, it's so funny how, given that they storyboarded that at the time and stuff, how modern this movie feels in terms of its potential world building, whilst also being an incredibly complete film, an incredibly complete story. Now that scene at the very end with the pieces coming back together, that would be an after credits scene. You know what I mean? And everything you got before the credits, as it were, is a really complete, amazing story. So yeah, it's amazing that it manages. It's modern films, Dan, need to learn from this movie, even though it was a box office bomb, because this movie is the perfect example of telling a complete story, but also putting enough in that you've got things you can expand on in sequels if you want.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, I almost understand why the scene was cut. I think it was budget in the end, because it's a very expensive sequence. I think the previous scene was just cut on the grounds of, will kids be interested in seeing two adults flirt with each other? It's 30 seconds, let's snip that. But I think my understanding is that this sequence that we're referring to now was cut because it was an expensive sequence and it wasn't ever finished. But I think it's interesting in a weird way. I almost think the movie is so much smaller. It's sort of that Doctor Who thing of you don't always need to know. He's from space is enough for me. Does that make sense? I'm glad I have that stuff because, as you said, it adds attention to the movie. But in terms of lore and world building, I honestly, I don't know if it changes a huge amount about how I feel about the movie. Because I don't know actually. Because I guess the idea that this scene really solidifies, really knocks home, is more of a thematic thing than the actual physical information you're imparting. And that is, he's not just capable of being a gun or a weapon. That's what he was literally built for. That's the difference, isn't it? From a sort of storytelling perspective, it's not that every one of us has the capability of good and bad. It actually changes that sort of theme of the story to, you might very well have been literally made to commit evil, to commit crimes, to commit violence, in his case, but you can still choose. And that actually changes, I think, the message of the movie more than it changes the plot. And it's just interesting to think how much that does change how I see the Iron Giant as a character, and what they were trying to tell me with that character and his journey. He was literally built for that purpose, which does give a whole different context to everything that follows it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, and it definitely enhances it. Yeah,
and it's animated
and
brilliantly,
again,
right? And considering they finished this animation in 2015, 15 years, 16 years after the rest of the movie was completed, I was really concerned it was going to look out of place. I think it's a little sharper, a little more HD when we go into the vision. But I think you just assume that's because that's the vision. That's what that looks like.
Well, Dan, two things, Dan. One, I think it's really impressive that you just like you say, you can't see the joins.
Yeah, not at all.
And two, as the creators of Dad's Army said, set something in the past and it will never feel out of date.
Yes,
because it was out of date to begin with.
Yeah,
It sort of feels like
because it's a period piece, I guess. Yeah, but I mean, even like just from a technical perspective, I kind of was a little like, I wonder if I'll see the seams of just the switch over to a sharper image quality. Like, will it look sharper? Will it look more modern? Will the movements be slightly less janky because technology has come along further along, and therefore it'll stand out for looking a bit different? I think because the context of the scene, even if it did look a little different, you get away with it, I think. But also you don't see the seams at all. It's remarkable.
The signature edition as a whole looks different anyway. Presumably, it's been the animation has been remastered or upgraded or like upscaled or something.
Yeah, remastered, but I not reanimated. So they've given it a slightly shinier coat and maybe improved some of the coloring. But like I don't think it's not quite the same as actually like from scratch reanimating. And I will say that there's a little less grain to the modern footage because obviously, I assume created almost entirely digitally. But it's you would I honestly, if you showed someone this movie and said one of the scenes in this movie was animated more recently, I think they would struggle to pick it out. I think it looks great. It's very charming and well done. It's the grain. It's the lack of grain. That is the difference. I've just pulled it up in front of me and I've gone between two of the scenes. It's the lack of film grain that really sort of gives it away. And the only shot that it actually affects, because most of this shot is obviously the giant and what the giant is remembering, which is all weird space stuff anyway. But the shot that it really is the only shot in the whole movie that would potentially be the clue if you were trying to suss it out is the shot of Dean on the couch when he wakes up. Because that's obviously not in the memory sort of thing, and it's he looks a little cleaner. Other than that, you wouldn't know, and spotting that would be a fucking miracle. Yeah, because it's such a quick shot. Like that's the only shot that gives it away, and it's tiny. So yeah, good luck.
Do you think we, especially talking specifically about the signature edition, do we think we have, can we add to the list? Do we think RoboCop, Die Hard, The Iron Giant, those are the movies we've watched and gone, well, perfect movie.
Yeah, I mean, Christ, you might be right. I mean, I still insist Groundhog Day is basically a perfect movie, but I don't think you.
Groundhog Day.
I don't think. Did we both agree on that? I can't remember.
I think to be honest, I think we've said it about others as well. I was just the obvious ones that came into my head. To be honest with you, I'd say personally, I'd say Groundhog Day over RoboCop. So yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, I think there's a handful. Yeah, you're right. No, you're right. It was RoboCop that we kind of slightly disagreed on it with, where you were like, you acknowledged that there wasn't much to criticize about the movie, but you just didn't. I guess you didn't enjoy it that much. Like, so there were things in it that you just didn't love. So it was like hard.
Yeah,
for you to, is that fair?
I think so. Yeah, I know there were definitely things like maybe I thought some elements were a bit rushed or something. I don't know. I watched the film, recorded the episode a long time ago, but I definitely. I don't think I felt it personally as much as Groundhog Day and Die Hard. With the Iron Giant, I'm. I'm sure we will find things, but I'm almost out of things to say.
I've got one big one. If maybe this is the opportunity to talk about the one thing that I was never sure I liked about the movie, and I can't remember what I thought as a kid, so I'm not going to pretend this has been my thought for years. But when I watched the 2015 version, it really struck me. I didn't love the reveal at the end that he was potentially reassembling. And I know the movie sets it up because there's the bit earlier in the movie where he gets hit by the train and then we see him repairing himself, right? So I know they set up that he can do that. And they even show that same piece that Hogarth is given, the one that goes in his ear and links his jaw back together. That's the same piece Hogarth is given at the end, but he watches it go into his ear and earlier in the movie. So it's all set up, and I'm not trying to imply it isn't, but I just feel like, I know it's a kid's movie, so this is the counter argument to what I'm about to say is, it's a kid's movie, a happy ending is kind of a prerequisite. But I like the idea of a darker ending where the sacrifice sticks more. Because there's an element of, did he know he'd survive that? Because if he did, then the sacrifice means less. Because he's just going, I'm just going to go up there, I'll get hit by the bomb, and then I'll be back in a month. I'll just reassemble myself. It'll take a while, because my pieces will be spread across the earth or whatever. But I'll get there.
I don't think he knew, because it's such a big explosion that it you believe it killed him, as opposed to if he'd have just fallen apart like he did on the train.
Yeah, but you and I both know what a nuclear bomb is. The Iron Giant doesn't. Was it a nuke? Whatever it is.
Yeah, I see your point.
I just because obviously he's a metal man from space that's been in space wars. Our limited technology, even our strongest bombs. Isn't there an element of just like, of course he survived?
But he's still, regardless of whether he knows he's going to be okay, he still makes that choice. Do you know what I mean?
But that's not a hard choice to make. Look, if I said to you, Chris, here's a thing you can do that will save thousands of lives with very little inconvenience to you, because you'll be fine again afterwards. Not as brave a choice when you know you're going to be fine, right?
Yeah, I do see what you're saying. And
here's the thing.
I hate to agree, but I do see what you're saying.
He's as a character, obviously lost a lot of his memory as well. He doesn't seem to know where he is or what's going on, and I could be that. Maybe that's just my reading of it. Maybe he does know exactly what he is from the beginning, but my impression was that as a character, he did not 100% know his own deal. Maybe he bumped his head when he landed. Oh, I know that they say that, don't they? Because he's got that divot in his head, so he doesn't 100% remember who he is and why he's there. But I still feel like he might have known that, and I just think you take that ending off, or even make it subtler. Even make it subtler than actually showing him reassembling. Hogarth's got the piece, and it has a little bit of a glow while he's asleep. Just leave that open. Because actually showing him basically reassembled and fine is a bit...
It still says the same. You still know what that means, though, don't
yeah,
you? Do you know what I mean? It's subtler.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
I think the way to do it more
subtly.
Well, I was going to say is you show that the train crash was still painful for him, even though he reassembles. It still took a lot out of him.
Yeah,
but even that you'd still argue, or you have his English backwards. You have his English better, and he says he says, well, Hogarth says to him, will you be able to rebuild yourself this time? And he looks up at the sky and the bomb and just kind of goes, I don't think so. I don't think so, kid. I don't think so, kid. Whatever.
No, he turns around and he goes, I don't think so, kid, but I'm going to have a Corona and remember my family before I go up there. Now, where's my tank top?
Because but I think the thing with that is you just go, how has his language got so good in so many days? Because I don't know about you, Dan, but here's a point. Here's a critique of the movie. Fucking Hogarth is doing well, isn't he? As far as I can tell, Hogarth has had 4 hours sleep in 2 days.
Yes, I wondered this because the movie. I think someone worked it out that the movie takes place over 5 days. But the first night, Hogarth does sleep. Because the first night is just the night that he lands, and Hogarth hasn't met him yet, if memory serves. But then the rest of it, Hogarth does not seem to sleep. They do 2 different nights where we very clearly see Hogarth does not sleep at all. Where he, there's the one which we need to talk about, because it's one of my favourite scenes in the entire movie. Him and the agent staring off, the stare off. Oh. That scene,
and that comes. I believe I got the feeling chronologically after the day where he literally has had 0. At least that day, he could. Whilst I think he wakes up before the agent, there's nothing to say he's faking being asleep when the agent is like, haha, he's finally gone to sleep. I thought that was going to be revealed to be fake. But there's nothing to say it is, other than the fact that he is up before. In my head, he gets some sleep there
when he wakes up.
Yeah, but he could.
When the agent wakes up, he set up a whole fake version of himself in the bed.
Yeah, but there's nothing to say that he couldn't have woken up, seen that the agent was asleep, did that, gone out, arranged the art exhibition thing, and then come back. You could argue that if you wanted to argue that he got some sleep.
Yes,
but the night before, we categorically see he didn't. Well, whether I couldn't say for certain it was the night before. I think it is though.
Yeah, it is.
He categorically gets no sleep. Because they do that great gag where he sneaks in, goes to get into bed, and she appears and is like, "Oh, you're up."
And he's like, "Yep." And he's like, and she's like, "Oh, you made your bed," because he's not gotten in it yet. Yeah, it's a great gag. It's a great scene. That's the thing we haven't talked about really. This movie is fucking funny. This movie has so many great moments of comedy in it, and some subtler than others. One of them. By any chance, did you happen to freeze frame the newspaper that Dean is reading before the big tidal wave hits him?
No, I don't think so.
No, it's really blink and you'll miss it. So for those who don't remember, they're at the water, they're at the river, the local lake, and Hogarth dives into the water, little cannonball. Then the Iron Giant seemingly walks away from the lake, but then he runs up to it and does a dive of his own, which displaces a huge amount of water, creating essentially a tidal wave. And Dean, the character who's been reading a newspaper, slowly lowers it and sees the water coming towards it, which you can see, I think, reflected in his glasses as an audience. But if you look at what the paper says, it says, "Disaster seen as catastrophe looms." Which is such a great gag. It's right there in frame as that's what's happening. It's so good. So the movie's full of subtle, weird, funny things like that.
Oh man, one of them, it's literally toilet humor, but I can't tell you how much I enjoyed. So for those that don't remember, the agent has his ice cream spiked by laxative chocolate.
Yes.
And then we see the agent go to the loo, and then we see a montage. Yeah. And so the montage starts, and it's Hogarth and the giant, and then it cuts back to the agent's investigation of the situation. And we see the agent interviewing someone. And I'm like, in my head, I go, I'd really like to have seen the laxative thing become a theme, but they're surely not going to they're not going to have him pop off to the toilet in this montage. And then literally, basically, in the montage, all of his scenes are him investigating something and then having to dart off to go to the loo because the chocolate laxative is hung around. And it's like I say, it's literally toilet humor, but it is very funny, the fact that they executed that. Do you know what I mean? And they excuse the pun,
they do it as well,
followed through on it.
There's one bit where he's like in the woods and he finds a clue, and his face shifts, and you think he's going, "Ooh, a clue," but actually no, it's because he needs to go to the toilet, and then he runs off. It's done really well, and I also really like. There's a great one for him, and it's just again, we're talking very tiny. There's one where he's just on the phone in the house. And the house, they have like an oven glove hanging on like the fridge on a hook or something, and it's got like a googly eye face on it, and he just turns it round while he's on the conversation, and it's so subtle. They don't point it out. There's no reference to it, nothing like that. It's just one of those subtle little things, like what a misery he is. But it's quite funny to watch him do it. Like he can't even see a googly-eyed fucking oven glove. That bothers him to the point where he has to turn it around. Like I don't know. There's a lot to enjoy. Yeah, it's really a funny movie.
Yeah, it's so good. It's very funny. It's and the message, you know, as we've already talked about, but that message of you can choose who you can be and all of that stuff just comes across so beautifully and cleanly. And I think it's because it's not bogged down with lore. It's not bogged down with more giants coming and all the things that I would do in a sequel. All the mistakes, Dan, I would make in a sequel called The Iron Giants aren't made here, and it's beautiful for it. Like, it's such a self-contained movie that really zeroes in and focuses on the boy's relationship with the giant, and then the antagonist, which is the agent, and it's all in service of that. And like, I just think it's great.
Yeah, I think it, to the movie's credit, I think what it really does is like it goes small scale in order to accentuate those story beats, those character things, and I think that's like a very deliberate choice, because we get all this extra time to do stuff like that. That we wouldn't otherwise have. And I think also, like, I mean, you look at the ending, the basic setup of that ending. What you really want is just for the giant to make a choice, right? And if you've invaded Earth with other giants, there's no clean, non-messy way to do that moment that isn't bogged down in a million other, story beats and complications. And you're right, a sequel would be fascinating on the grounds of you could do a whole movie based around the idea of, and I don't think this is a mistake, I think this is what you would do if you were doing a sequel, his race come back for him, but he's changed. So it's now about, in the face of societal norms for himself and for his people, he's changed and is fighting that and fighting for the new him, But that's across a whole movie. You can't do that in the third act of an existing movie.
No.
That's the problem.
And then, do you want to know what you do in a third movie, Dan? Because I've thought about it. You do kind of like the setup at the end of Captain Marvel. So the giants that have all now converted go off to other planets to try and convert more giants. But in that world, into those planets, to those worlds that they visit, they are still the villains. So you don't only get them fighting with themselves, but you've also got all the people that are scared of them and see them as the villains, and how they face, not just it isn't just about who they could be, but it's also then about who they were, and they really have to come to face and come to terms with who they were as well as who they are.
I've got a phone call coming through here, Chris. It's Brad Bird. 1 second. Hello? What's that? You've heard the podcast, even though we've not released it yet. You're hearing it as we're recording it, and you love all of these ideas. Excellent. Let's talk terms. I'm now acting as Chris's agent.
Do you want to hear me? Do you want to hear me take it too far, Dan?
Always.
Do you know what it's called? Do you know what it's called? The Iron Giants 3, but 3 is spelled Free. I ruined it.
I thought you were going to make an Alien 3 joke, because you did Iron Giants. I thought you were going to go Alien 3, but the 3 is like the small 3, like as if you're timesing it by 3.
Oh no, yeah, that would have been good too.
And it's set
No,
on
'cause
a prison planet and all that jazz.
I think the Iron Giants 3 actually fits that plot. That's what's so annoying about it.
Yeah.
But you couldn't call it that; it'd be too dumb.
Yeah. So anyway, and we get David Fincher to direct the third one, and then he can disown it later, because of studio interference.
I do think, but this is what I mean. Like, this is why, because this happened with. I can't remember what film it happened with. Oh, it was A Little Shop of Horrors, wasn't it? Where like you can tell I've enjoyed a film I've not seen before if I then go deep on the lore and like look it up and
Right.
read all this stuff about it. That's how enjoyable this film was. Like,
It's a delight.
and that's how good I think it is. That I'm like, I literally am sat there. And don't get me wrong, I'm kind of glad because they do the magic trick of also making it work as a standalone thing. I'm glad it wasn't ruined with sequels. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, but equally, part of me's like, oh, it's so ripe for the picking. I'm like looking at it, going, how is, given the shit they have turned into a live action movie, how? Yeah. Presumably, just because they didn't want to get, confused with Iron Man is the only reason this has not become a live action movie. But you know what I mean?
I just think Warner Brothers is so terrified of, after it was such a flop. I think they're just really scared of doing anything else with the property, which I get. It was, when a movie was that much of a commercial failure, and it was their own fault. We'll talk about it, but yeah, it's a real issue. What do you think to this set? So it's not just set in the 50s in general. It's set sort of very much with a tone of the Cold War being part of it. We see Sputnik, the reason Agent Mansley is so determined to investigate this is because, they're scared about the Russians inventing things that they don't have. Choosing to set this alongside the Cold War and then actually using that as a thrust for some of the character choices is a bold move for a kids movie. I mean, the Pinocchio, the Guillermo del Toro Pinocchio, is another one that did that thing of, setting a kids movie alongside like a real world conflict, and real war, and making it quite serious. This movie doesn't do it quite to the degree of that movie, but it does. It's there, and I can't imagine young Dan saw this movie and walked away going, "Well, that's a really interesting take on the Cold War." Do you know what I mean? Like that anxiety that the characters are feeling, and those suspicions that characters are having. It's not just Mansley; it's the people in the cafe. It's the wider world. Everyone except for, it seems, Dean and Annie.
Yeah, well, the reaction to the nuclear bomb is so like gut wrenching, because it's so, the acceptance is so quick.
Yeah. Because
this threat has been looming for these people anyway. So it's just like, oh, okay, well, this is happening. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's so sad.
And also the fact that this movie works regardless is crazy, because as a kid I won't have known what that context was. So the movie had to sell me on that all on its own, right? I would have been, well, I don't know actually, how old would I have been when this came out? 99. I'd have been 12. Yeah. So I definitely don't know a huge amount about the Cold War, if I know about it at all, 12. So I think there's something to be said, for the fact this movie works for children, even without the context, because I think the movie does enough to give you the feeling of the paranoia that the people are feeling, that you understand it, even though you don't necessarily understand exactly what it's referencing. Yes, really well done. Really well done.
Yeah, it's really, really well done.
So, do I have anything else? I'm sure I must have other things to talk about now. Oh, the music's amazing. We don't often talk about the music in this. We often should. The music's great. It's really sort of charming and sort of appropriate, and it has to balance a lot of tones, because the movie shifts from sad to happy and fun to it just back and forth a lot. So yeah, whoever scored this will have had a job. So yeah, 10 points to them for managing to sort of deftly balance the tones the way the rest of the film does.
Speaking of that balancing a tone, here's a question for you then.
Yes.
We've sort of we've touched upon it a bit, but how do you think the movie gets away with veering from the sort of heartwarming giant story to the how does the FBI agent, how do they make that work? Because the FBI agent is at various points a slapstick character. You know what I mean? We've talked about a montage where they're running to the toilet.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you think the movie gets away with the balancing of that?
I think it's because that fits between the movie's other two tones reasonably well, right? Like, because the movie has sort of three gears that it steps into, right? Heartwarming tale of boy and giant, tragic story of a being that doesn't know what it is, discovering that it might have been made for destruction with a Cold War setting, and then sort of this comedic, bumbling agent that's just trying to prove to his boss this thing is real, right? And I think that one is set between the two. You know, the light story of a boy meeting a giant and befriending it's reasonably comedic. When you put it alongside that giant happens to potentially be a weapon, that's the other end of that spectrum. And you kind of need something that goes between those two things so it doesn't feel completely like, 0 to 100. So then you've got this story that's kind of the 50, which is like, it's the guy who is a serious threat because he is an adult that's investigating the existence of this metal man, as he's referring to it for a big chunk of the movie. And while he's not particularly the most effective FBI agent, if he's made it, the movie makes it very clear, if he finds the evidence he needs, he's going to very quickly go from comic relief to a genuine threat. So I actually think the way they make it work is that he is actually the key to bridging the other two things that feel tonally disparate.
Interesting, yeah.
I think he is literally the glue that brings those two themes together. I think otherwise the movie might feel like it's jumping between, the boy and the giant doing cannonballs to the giant being revealed to be a machine of death, and then dying or sacrificing himself to save the town from a nuclear bomb. And then, of course, the beauty of the town realizing he saved them and having the statue commissioned. I assume Dean didn't just make that of his own, account and stick it up in the town centre, because I feel like the council just pull that down if he. They pull it down like 2 days later. I assume someone in authority approved that statue's making.
I'd assume so, yeah.
So I like I think that's how you bridge those two stories. And that's one of the reasons I think it works. And he's such an interesting character because he is flicking between those two modes. And obviously he switches as the movie goes on. At the beginning of the movie, before he has his evidence, he's much more comic relief all the time. And then towards the end of the movie, once he has his evidence and he's starting to pull it together, he then becomes much more of a threat. And then, of course, he just veers into madness, which is enjoyable for its own reasons. I mean, how did you feel it works?
Yeah.
Did you have an answer of your own to that question? Had you thought about it
before
you asked?
No. I was just thinking of discussion points, and that one struck me. But I hadn't. I was forming thoughts on it when I asked the question, and would echo your response for sure.
So, with that in mind, did I make any other notes about the movie? This is very tiny. Love that there's a giant obvious on-off switch at the power pylons. I think all giant power pylons should have just a big cartoon on-off switch.
Just also like on the outskirts, like not even in the power plant. I mean, unless you can
something
argue
that's accessible by any passerby.
Unless there's like shots that suggest. No, I don't think there are though. Like he knocks down a wall or something, and that's why he can get in and do it. But yeah, it certainly feels accessible to, like you say, any randomer walking by.
We keep having these blackouts. Some guy just keeps hitting a big giant obvious labelled on-off switch for the whole town's power. Why would he do that? I don't know. What a prick. We should really move that. We should move that switch.
I really liked. That's another thing I really liked. When the blackout happened, and like you see the mum have to switch to a torch, making there'll be way more tension, and her horror way more real at not knowing where her son is and stuff.
Yeah, and I think as well, actually, speaking of the townsfolk, I do think this movie does a great job characterizing the sort of small town vibe and the people that are there, so that at the end of the movie you're not just concerned for the safety of the main characters, the characters you've directly been introduced to, but they build up a whole cast of quirky little people that inhabit this town that you kind of, care for. And I think that's another big strength of the movie and why you care so much at the end, and how quickly they're on the side of the giant once they realize what's happening as well. I think is another one of those you shown them doing something that's made me feel affection for them, rather than told me, their choice to sort of be more supportive towards the end once they realise makes me like those characters a lot.
But also, and we have talked about this in a way because of all the compliments, but we've not directly said this. It's also how fucking good the script is. Like, setting up those two kids early on, so you've got these kids that don't believe the giant is real, and then having them be the one that become in danger, so that the Iron Giant can very publicly save someone in front of the town. Like, that's some fucking smart writing. Like, that's some real, attention to. In a worse film, he's saving any old kids. Like, and it's not that we the audience feel more jeopardy of them hanging over the edge because we've already met the kids. It's not so much that. It's more just, if those kids can be characters we've already met, if it can connect to them realizing he was telling the truth, and therefore help aid the fact that in the flash forward or whatever that they're now friends, like why would you not do that? But again, in a less well written version, those two kids are anybody, or he's saving Hogarth publicly or whatever.
Yeah, agreed. I think I think the writing is the movie's biggest strength. I mean, don't get me wrong; it's beautifully drawn, really well acted. The music's great. We talked about all these things, but I do think the real strength of this film is the script. It is remarkably tight, really well told, not a second wasted. Just really, really good stuff. Big recommend on Iron Giant.
Absolutely.
Definitely worthy of its reputation, I think.
Agreed.
Shall we do some triv, Chris? Triv time?
Let's triv it up!
I'm going to give you some trivia. So if you're new to the podcast, we do a little bit of trivia at the end of each podcast. I say a little bit. Sometimes it gets well out of hand. There's a fair bit for this week, but not too much, I don't think. So I'll fly through these. But anyway, this film is based on a novel. I say based on. We'll get to that. But yeah, there's a film called there's a book called The Iron Man. The author of the novel is called Ted Hughes, and the character in this, Hogarth Hughes, has the surname to honour the original author. But the novel, it's basically nothing like this movie in the end, because so he wrote his novel as a way of confronting his children after the suicide of their mother, who was Sylvia Plath. So, and a real different approach, a real different tone, a real different vibe than this film. But what's really interesting is this film was also inspired by a really sad situation. Brad Bird was inspired to make this film as a memorial to his sister, who died at the hands of her estranged husband in an incident of gun violence. So he pitched. Oh God. He pitched another version of Iron Giant, or Iron Man as it was called in the book form, where it was, what if a gun had a soul and didn't want to be a gun? And when you think the book and the film both came from such tragic, horrible events, it's crazy the film is as warm and sort of pleasant as it is. Because both the original text and the script. This is now again. I want to clarify that the story of this movie ended up bearing almost no resemblance to the book that it's based on. The idea was a 12-page outline Brad Bird had written with the very basic thinnest of ideas borrowed from the original book. The author sadly actually died a year before the film came out, so he never got to see it. So we have no idea if the author of the book would have enjoyed this particular take. But no one else was on the project when Brad Bird was writing the 12-page outline. And then he had 9 months before he had to begin turning in storyboards and designs to animators to complete. And during that time, the studio, because he was a first-time director, decided to hire a writer to properly pull his storyboards and his treatment into a full screenplay. And Brad Bird was apparently a little resistant at first because he was hoping to write it himself, but then he read a script by the writer Tim McCanlies. He had an unfilmed screenplay called Second Lions, which apparently did get made in the end. Second Hand Lions, sorry, in 2003. I didn't realize it got made in the end, but he read that script and loved it so much he was happy to work with him. Apparently, Tim McCanlies wrote the screenplay in about 2 months. He beat the time frame he was given by a month. He was told he had 3 months to put the draft together, and he did it in 2. Amazing, considering how tight this script is and how good this script is and how polished it feels. Obviously, the name The Iron Man was changed to The Iron Giant for the obvious reason everyone is thinking of, is that, of course, there is a character in comic books and later in film that was quite popular called Iron Man. I've never heard of him, though. I'm not sure who that's referring to, but apparently, a vaguely popular character.
Yeah, I think Tom Cruise played him in the film version. I think.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
That might be why I've not seen it. I don't love Tom Cruise. You know, I enjoy some of his work, but I don't love. Mixed feelings. So that would explain why I've not seen it. Several people were considered for the voice of the Iron Giant. Peter Cullen, famously the voice of Optimus Prime, would have been a good choice, interesting choice. Sean Connery, Frank Welker, James Earl Jones. But I'll be honest with you, I don't think I'd want any of these over who it went to. If I'm being honest, I think Vin was
not
pitch perfect. This is a really weird one. So the original studio preference for Dean was John Travolta, and the original studio preference for Kent, the agent, and when I tell you this, Chris, you resist the urge to laugh, was Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I mean, it's hard not to laugh, Dan.
That's fucking terrible. That is like one of the worst casting. If that had happened, this movie would be a mess. That is the worst possible voice to choose for that, and he's such a linchpin of the movie.
Yeah, I just can't imagine a world where that just doesn't. You know what I mean? Like you gotta cast Arnold in roles where the audience just seeing them as Arnold is not a problem, and I don't think that's the case here.
Agreed.
Especially when it's a voice role Arnold, as well.
Yeah, because it's like an all-American secret agent guy. He can't sound Austrian. Like, yeah, you know what I mean? He's looking for. He's supposed to be like, the whole point is that he's like a true blue, full-blooded American man that's worried about the Ruskies. You make him Austrian. It just raises questions.
Big ones.
Yeah,
and again, it just makes you like, it's okay to picture Arnold when you can literally picture Arnold in a live action movie.
Yes.
But to picture Arnold, it's like, imagine a full version of the Simpsons cameo, You're just picturing Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's distracting.
Yeah, I agree. Weird choice. I've just realised that the door is open and the my laundry was spinning in the next room over a minute ago. Could you hear that, Chris?
Not that I particularly noticed. No.
Okay, fine. If you couldn't hear it, the rule of thumb is that it didn't go on the microphone. I'll apologise anyway in case anyone could hear that. Sorry, I didn't realise that the spin cycle would line up with the podcast. But there you go. And I didn't realise that because I left the doors open in between. Just to stop the cat from meowing, because he just doesn't like it when there are doors closed in the house. Yeah, there you go. He likes access to all the rooms. Even if he doesn't want to go in the room, he likes to know he has the option. that's his vibe.
Fair enough.
Other actors that were considered for Kent Mansley once they safely moved away from the insane choice of Arnold Schwarzenegger were Tommy Lee Jones, Alec Baldwin, Burt Reynolds, Kevin Spacey, James Woods, Dennis Hopper, Patrick McGoohan? I don't know who that is. And Patrick Stewart. All the Patricks. I think Tommy Lee Jones probably would have worked quite well. I still like what we got. Obviously, I wouldn't change it, but Tommy Lee Jones would have been a good choice. I think he would have done a good job. I think Dennis Hopper probably could have done it quite well too. I don't love Burt Reynolds or James Woods. Oh, maybe James Woods. I think James Woods could have probably gotten away with it. I think there's a few of those guys that probably could have done it. I don't think they'd have been as good as what we got, but they would have been. It wouldn't have been the mess that it would have been if they'd chosen Arnold. So I'm happy with any of those choices. Other voice options for Annie Hughes, other than the eventual casting of Jennifer Aniston, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Nicole Kidman, Julianne Moore, and Meg Ryan.
I think Sarah Michelle Gellar. Sorry.
Yeah,
I think would have done a good job. She's probably the only name of all the alternative castings.
Yeah.
The one that I'm like, okay, if you have to, is subbing Aniston for Michelle Gellar.
Yeah.
But again, I think Aniston's brilliant, and I think Meg Ryan. There's a similar problem to the one I was describing with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Or you're distracted because you're picturing Meg Ryan. Whereas I think that's what's so impressive about Aniston's voice work here. It didn't, to me, sound like Jennifer Aniston in the sense of when I was told it was Aniston, I went back and went, oh yeah, it is Jennifer Aniston, but it wasn't distracting me during the film because you know what I mean. Yes,
I do. Yeah, it's definitely subtle. It took me a couple of minutes to remember it was her. I was like, yeah. So she's definitely doing something different with her voice here that sort of separates her.
And I think a big difference there is for anyone because I'm sort of almost in my head arguing with myself a little bit, going, well, Toy Story sounds like Tim Allen. It sounds like Tom Hanks. You're not particularly distracted by that. But I think that's because they're playing not, essentially people. Tim Allen is putting on to infinity and beyond. He's putting on a voice, whereas it's harder if playing essentially live action humans, I think, to put on a voice, because you know what I mean. It has to sound like a mum, and I think Jennifer Aniston does a really good job of putting on enough of a voice that you're not just, you know what I mean?
I think the real issue here is specifically the choice of Arnold Schwarzenegger, who does not, in my opinion, seem capable of doing what Jennifer Aniston has successfully done here, or what Tim Allen and Tom Hanks have done in Toy Story, which is shift their voice or the performance enough that you don't think about it. I don't think Schwarzenegger is talented enough an actor, with his voice at the very least. I think he's a very good physical actor, but I don't think he's got the ability. I mean, Christ, he's still got that accent, like that insane half American, half Austrian accent that doesn't sound like anyone anywhere. No one sounds like him, right? Because he doesn't even sound like an Austrian person. He's that weird accent that he's had since the beginning of his career. He's never bothered to shift it ever in any role, no matter what the role is. And there have been several roles that might have required it, for example, I mean, in Terminator, I will say this: if you're sending a robot back to be inconspicuous and assassinate people, I don't think you'd make it look or sound like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He couldn't be more conspicuous if he tried. He might as well have just been a robot. But anyway, point aside, I think the problem here and the disconnect and the reason that you're struggling with this idea and why that would be such a problem is I think you don't believe that he's capable of doing what Aniston achieved here, which is changing their voice enough or delivering a performance that's shifted enough that you get lost in the role and forget that it's a famous person. You'd be thinking that's Arnold because it would sound like nothing but Arnold, because it could only sound like Arnold. Because Arnold has never been able to do anything different with his voice. That's what I'm.
Yeah, I think that's all.
Because while you're right with Tim Allen is very much exaggerating his voice for Woody, for Buzz. I think Tom Hanks is actually doing something very close to his own voice for Woody, but he still gets away with it because he shifts it just enough. to make it a character, you know.
Yeah,
and that's just
fair.
through the magic of acting. Whereas I just don't think, again, great physical actor, I just don't think he's got the voice work in him, does Arnold. So that's, I think, the disconnect. To get back to the trivia, the film was set in the year 1975. It was going to be set in 1957. I reversed those last two numbers. I don't know what just happened. A stroke, I assume. The film is set in 1957. It was going to be in the 50s no matter what, because it needed to be set during the Cold War. That specific year was chosen because it is the year Brad Bird was born. So this is something else that was slightly different in the signature edition. So originally when he made the movie, he wanted the Disneyland attraction advert Tomorrowland on the TV in the scene where the hand is moving through the house, which is a great comedic scene, by the way. We didn't really talk about the scene, but it's a good scene. But they couldn't clear it for some reason. There was some weird rights issue because obviously this is Warner Brothers, that's Disney, where they wouldn't allow it to happen. Weirdly, when they got to the signature edition, they were able to clear it and put the Tomorrowland logo back in, which, I mean, ironically, because Brad Bird actually went and directed the movie Tomorrowland for Disney. So, yeah, I think that's a weird bit of, like, universe folding in on itself.
Which was after, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not thinking of the wrong Tomorrowland. Yeah, right.
Significantly later, yeah. So it's funny, because I just think he's always had an interest in that sort of stuff. You know, the old, like, World's Fair and these, like, sort of 50s visions of the future. You know, I think he really finds that all very visually and aesthetically interesting. And I think as a result, you know, not that you can see that in a huge amount of his work, it's worth adding. Obviously, you know, didn't see that in Incredibles, you know, didn't see that in Mission Impossible 4, which he directed, you know. But yeah, it's definitely been in a certain amount of his work.
Yeah, but Incredibles in tone, though, you know, there's a reason they say it's the best Fantastic Four movie.
It definitely is. It definitely is. I think it'll probably remain that way too. It's going to be hard to beat The Incredibles. That's a really great movie. Brad Bird's a very good director. Well, like I even think Tomorrowland's a lot of fun. It's not a perfect movie, but it's a really good movie. Anyway, so he got to have his cake and eat it too. In the end, he did get to put the Tomorrowland logo in this movie. I assume, after making the movie Tomorrowland, it was easier for him to convince Disney to let him put a small reference in. I'm going to shut the door because the machine just hit the spin cycle again. I thought it had finished, but apparently it's still doing. So I'm going to shut the door just to be safe.
Yeah, that's fine. No problem.
I've shut the door. I'm back. I've shut the door and I'm back. Okay. Oh yeah. As the film was set in the 1950s, Brad Bird chose to put this film in like a real widescreen format, much to the displeasure of Warner Brothers, because at the time movies weren't quite formatted that way anymore. They were CinemaScope now, so they were like taller. So as a joke, he wanted to incorporate the old CinemaScope logo at the front of the movie, to sort of, you know, emphasize that. But that's owned by 20th Century Fox, who refused to allow him to do that. So everyone was not happy with Brad Bird putting their logos in. So he didn't get to do that at the end. It seems like he was very much, you know, pushing against whatever Warner Brothers wanted. You know, they wanted Arnold Schwarzenegger. He said no. They wanted this. He wanted the Tomorrowland thing. They couldn't clear that, and now he's pushing against. He made the movie in a format they didn't want him to make it in. Yeah, for a first-time director,
it's such a shame, though, isn't it? Because they probably blamed a lot of those things for its lack of success.
Yeah. True. Yeah, it's true. Brad Bird personally
unfairly, I think the movie's
What was I saying?
Unfairly. Just reiterating unfairly. Like,
oh yeah, 100%.
You know, the movie is a success in terms of its quality.
Yes, 100%. Brad Bird personally animated the scene where Hogarth rants to Dean about his problems in the super fast pace after he's had the espresso. Because the character is talking and moving around so rapidly, Bird had to actually draw at least some part of every in between the frames in an animated film. He basically normally They just draw the keyframes and someone fills it in. But because the character was moving so fast, he ended up drawing quite a lot of it. Because that's the way it worked. So yeah, that's fun. I like that he was that directly involved. Excluding groans and yells, the Iron Giant says a grand total of 53 words. That's not many words.
No. You got to wonder if on a per word basis, Vin Diesel's got to be probably, one of the highest paid or most successful actors, surely.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. Apparently there was quite a lot of debate during production about whether to show the giant returning or not. But Brad Bird says it was in his original treatment, so it was always part of the plan, and they stuck to that in the end. So there you go. Yeah, this is interesting. So in order to blend the computer-generated giant, so the giant is actually a CG creature with sort of like lines around him to make him look hand-drawn, into the rest of the more traditionally animated film, the technicians came up with a program that gave his lines a sort of wobble in order to match natural line imperfections that you would get in hand-drawn animation. I love the effort they went to make sure he blended in correctly. That's nice.
That's really cool.
As Hogarth is supposed to be 9 years old, and the year is 1957, Hogarth would have been born in 1948, and as of 2023, he's 75 years old.
Nice.
75 years old and still hanging out with that fucking giant. Right.
Yeah. You gotta love maths.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, here's an interesting one. When Hogarth first shows the giant, his Superman comics, the piece of music that plays under that is music from the Max Fleischer Superman cartoons of the 1940s, which I think is really neat because at this point, we'd had obviously the Christopher Reeve Supermans and arguably the more iconic, music would have been to use that. But of course, for the time period, those cartoons aired in the 1940s, so it's coming from the TV, I assume, the sound, and therefore, it's maybe arguably less iconic to Superman, but more in keeping with the rest of the film. I thought that was an interesting choice, and I liked it. I didn't recognise it immediately, though. I've not seen one of those Max Fleischer cartoons since I was about 7. Other than occasionally you see a bit of it in a documentary about comic books. They're fun though. They're really good for their time. I don't think I would get much out of them today.
That's fair.
Go on.
I just said that's fair.
Yeah. So a photo on the dresser that's clearly visible during the standoff with Kent reveals that Hogarth's father was a fighter pilot, which somewhat explains his absence. Maybe he got goosed.
Yeah, I get. Yeah. Sorry, I was distracted then because at first I thought you meant that like he was off serving. And I was like, what? So she has an affair? Yeah, I mean maybe. Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm assuming he's dead, which is why I'm sort of implying that he got goosed.
Yes. Yeah. No, I caught what you meant.
A training accident of some sort. And then Tom Cruise was all like, "My wingman," or Tom Cruise's dad.
The movie could have done that. It didn't. And again, I think unless you could make this idea work, but another bad version of this movie is the giant being a father figure and stuff like that. And so, yeah.
The choice to give the Iron Giant 3 tendrils emitting from him was sort of to be a little reference to War of the Worlds, 1953, which had obviously the tripods, the aliens with the 3 legs, that whole vibe. So, according to Brad Bird, in the documentary The Giant's Dream, Warner Brothers, in his opinion, failed to promote the movie at all. Promotion for the film also started extremely late. It started 4 months before release, whereas Disney's Tarzan, which came out around... I thought Disney's Tarzan came out earlier. Same year. Wow, okay. I would not have guessed that. So Disney's Tarzan came out in 1999 also. I would have guessed about 2 years earlier, but fair enough. I did see that in theatres. So maybe it was just the beautiful music of Phil Collins that drew me to the cinema. That, honestly, best music Phil Collins ever worked on. That Tarzan soundtrack's fucking great.
I don't know.
So good.
I don't know. I can feel it coming in the air tonight.
Right. One day we're
Oh,
gonna
Lord.
get to the Disney Tarzan movie, and you're gonna eat your words. Just saying.
Maybe. Can I say something irrelevant to Triv, but I want to say it before I forget?
Yeah, do it.
How fucking cool is the early shots of the giant in the sea where you think it's the lighthouse, but then like the second eye appears and stuff?
Oh, the reveal of the
fucking
giant and the tension in the
Fucking
build-up to
great.
his proper reveal, even with Hogarth,
Oh.
is amazing. Like, they really
good.
knew exactly how to play it, didn't they?
Yeah, it's so good.
You could really tell someone who knew how to tell a story visually made this movie. Like, it's so great. Yeah, no, 100% agree. It's brilliant. So yes. Oh yeah, so obviously he felt that Warner Brothers hadn't promoted the movie properly, basically, and that they, Tarzan had trailers a year in advance of the movie, whereas this had only had promotional material released 4 months before. So yeah, while the film received high praise from critics, it was a massive box office failure. It grossed only $23 million on a $70 million budget. That's the real stinger. It's not just that it only made 23 million, it's that they spent 70 million making it. 70 million making it, and they say you double it for marketing. Now, if it had a reduced marketing campaign because they were worried it wasn't going to hit, all right, let's say we add another 20, 30 million onto the for marketing. That's still 100 million-ish spent with a return of 23 million.
Yeah, it's hard to claim that as anything other, isn't it?
Like, when you look at that, it's really not so hard to see why they never went back.
Yeah, that's very fair.
Well, that's interesting. I've got two conflicting numbers on profit. Why is that? He says out loud. Let me look into that. Because that, so it says here it made. I've got two conflicting numbers on budget too.
I mean, I imagine both are still have it as a loss.
Yeah, for sure. Because I've got the budget here as 50 million as well. Yeah, it's a loss either way, but let me confirm, because I tell you where the best place to check is Box Office Mojo. They only put the figures once they've got them like pretty verified. So what does Box Office Mojo say? Box Office Mojo does have the budget as 70 million. So Wikipedia has the budget as 50, and the Triv on IMDb has the budget as 50. But I am more inclined to believe Box Office Mojo, if I'm being completely honest. And Box Office Mojo has its worldwide gross. Now, actually, this is something to specify. The worldwide gross here, this is from a weird era in time when box offices weren't reported properly globally. So actually, that 23 million that it made, that is less than it actually made, because that doesn't include anywhere outside of America. And we do not have data for that. So maybe it could have made another 10, 15 million elsewhere, but still nowhere near its budget. Nowhere near. So no matter how you slice it, the movie was a failure, sadly.
Yeah.
Madness. Absolute madness. So yeah, probably one of the bigger box office bombs we've had, I think. Yeah, definitely up there in terms of budget versus...
And such a shame. Like, I think that stings more than any other film we've done. Even the films that, weren't that successful. This being a box office bomb is a massive, massive shame.
Yeah, I would agree. So then, with that in mind, everyone's favourite bit of trivia, Chris. It's time for Cars Exist.
Meow.
So... sorry. Very quickly. Sorry. One other note here about why the movie didn't make a lot of money. Some speculate that it also might be part of the fact that it got its nationwide release in America on the same day as The Sixth Sense. Now, that may have helped somewhat. Hurt somewhat. But I'm not sure it's one or the other. Because one's a kid's film and one isn't. So I'm not 100% sure they're stepping on each other's toes. But
Well, also, The Sixth Sense picked up a lot of steam in but you know what I mean? It's not like people were like, do you know what I mean? It wasn't fucking Batman 89, was it?
That's a good question. How did The Sixth Sense do in the theaters? That is a good question, Chris. Let's find out. Oh no, that was okay. On a 40 million budget, it made 672 million.
Yes, yeah, but in terms of like,
it made its budget back 16 times over.
Yeah, but in terms of being competition on the day of release, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying The Sixth Sense wasn't successful. Mm-hmm. I'm saying it's not like there was a lot of, hype. Well, there might have been hype because the reviews are good, but it's not like it came out the same day as Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, is what I'm saying.
Right. I would agree. I would be inclined to agree. Yeah. It is a shame, though. But yeah, certainly some pundits feel they're related. That's why that was in the trivia. So anyway, back to Cars Exist.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, this podcast will literally never end. Hogarth's mum's car is a 1947 Chevrolet Advanced Design Thriftmaster. Ken is driving a 1949 Chevy Fleetmaster, and the car he borrows is a 1954 Oldsmobile. Dean's motorcycle is a 1957 Harley Davidson. And then, little extension, Chris. Planes exist. The fighter planes used in the film are FJ2/3.
Whoa. You can't specifically, right? You cannot, for the first time ever, insert noises in between every car and then not do a noise when you do a new exists. Right?
Okay. Planes exist.
I don't know.
Yeah. I think you can see why maybe I didn't choose to do a noise there. Yeah. I think you were dead against my choices until you were then forced to think of a noise for a plane yourself and went, oh shit. I tell you what, we'll do this one.
That's the Cars Exist noise.
It's a biplane.
Okay, I've got one. Right, introduce it again.
Okay, and now a new segment. Planes Exist.
Ladies and gentlemen, the pilot has given the signal to turn off the seatbelts light. Please feel free to move around the cabin.
Perfect. The fighter planes used in the film are FJ2/3 Furries. The Navy version of the F-86 Sabre. It was adapted for carrier-based operations in 1951. They were the first jets to be launched by steam catapult, as depicted in this movie, and of course, depicted not with steam catapults, but with catapults in the Top Gun movies. And I'm sorry, Chris, we're still not done because there's guns exist. Bang bang. These were all, by the way, I should clarify. The reason I'm doing so many exists this week is because these were all genuinely in the IMDb trivia. Like, I didn't go out and find these. We do an extra exists in a week where there's no cars exist. So, like, for Lord of the Rings, we did horses exist, right? But I didn't have to look for these. These were just in the actual trivia, and it made me laugh that so many things were being specified. So guns exist. General Rogard carries an M1911A1, and it's mostly seen in his holster, except for the moment when he uses it to fire upon the giant. The pistol sounds are the exact same sound effects used in Terminator 2 Judgment Day for the Beretta and Browning pistols that film uses. Also, Chris, while we're here, trains exist. The freight train that runs into the giant is being pulled by an Alco 464 streamlined Hudson passenger locomotive. And we're done.
Well
done, everyone.
Dan exists, and he did all that research.
He didn't. He found it all on IMDb. It was all just there. Still,
he clicked. He did the clicking, guys. He moved the mouse.
I did move the mouse.
And he moved it well.
And I moved it to Triv, and I clicked, and then I scrolled down. I don't have any other final thoughts other than everyone should go watch this movie. Next time, we sort of gave it away last week, but it's your choice, Chris. So you don't have to go in the direction we talked about last week if you don't want. But we sort of talked about what our what our trilogy would be. Where are we going? We'd like to confirm.
No, we are going to stick with it. It took up so much time last week. We have to stick with it, which means we are going to Le Pirates of the Caribbean.
Now, can I tell you something funny that happened, Chris, with this? We said that last week, and then about a few hours later on YouTube, there's a YouTuber called Just Right who does like video essays. And genuinely, like the day we recorded that episode and decided it, Just Right released a video called "The Pirates Trilogy is Pure Bliss."
Oh, really? He thinks it's like a pure.
I clearly enjoyed it on a rewatch of some sort. I wouldn't and won't watch the video until we've reviewed it. Because I'm always scared about being consciously or subconsciously influenced by that sort of thing. I don't necessarily want to repeat other people's opinions. I want to form my own. And I think if I agree with something they say, then I might feel compelled to say it. Do you know what I mean? Because I'll agree with that thought. So it's like, it's not a lie to say if I felt that way about the movie, but I don't want it to come from someone else. So I always I always try to stay away. So I won't be watching that until after we've reviewed the trilogy. But it's just very funny that clearly it was on other people's brains, which I thought was very interesting. So yeah, I recommend that channel, by the way, if anyone's listening. Just Right. To be fair, they've got 600,000 subscribers, nearly 700. I'm assuming people already know about this YouTube channel, but check it out. I recommend it. There's some really good stuff on there. So yeah, Pirates of the Caribbean, very interesting trilogy. I think remembered not that fondly now, but I remember very distinctly having a great time, particularly watching the second one in cinemas. I remember not being as impressed with the third, but I remember coming out of the cinema of the third one having had such a thoroughly good time, and I've always defended the second one ever since. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm excited to see. My memory of the second two is that they're a bit of a bit haphazard, a bit of a mess. But we shall see what we discover when watching them.
Yeah, I wonder, because I do think, like, I feel like we get so many generic blockbusters now. I wonder if at the time, particularly 2, felt special in that cinema landscape, and I wonder if now we'll see the DNA of like the MCU, because they're these like fun action adventure movies, aren't they, where he's quipping and he's getting into scrapes and he's saving the world, but also like he's a bit of an anti-hero in this sort of Tony Stark-esque way. He's not the most likable person, but he's doing the right thing. So I don't know. I wonder if maybe we'll see some of that DNA of what became them, but from before that, those were very common tropes in films.
Quite possibly, yeah.
So I'm excited. I'm genuinely excited about doing these. I even though the series has not got a great reputation now through, I think, a combination of people not loving not loving the sequels in general, I think, but that varies from whether it's not loving all the sequels, full stop, or they're the people that didn't mind the original trilogy or liked the original trilogy but hated the 2 that followed. There's one I've not even seen. I've not even seen the most recent one. So
I don't think I've seen. I haven't seen 4 or 5.
I saw 4, but I didn't see it in cinema because it got such a thorough thrashing. I didn't think it was. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to give it 2.5 hours of my time. I'm just going to wait. And then I caught it on demand or whatever later on. I streamed it from home, and hated it. Absolutely despised it. And I remember when the next one came out being like, no, I'm done. the last one put a sour taste in my mouth, and I'm not interested. So go away.
Yeah, and I think the latest one was like relatively 2017 or something.
Yeah,
like,
2017.
relatively
I only know that
recently.
because of I shouldn't talk about that. That's job stuff. But yeah, definitely 2017. So yeah, it's yeah. It's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to watching. So we'll come back in a week's time for that.
Me too.
Obviously, if you want to hear it right now, you're welcome to do so. You've just got to make that little extra step if you're interested in heading over to our Patreon and giving us as little as $1 a month. That gives you access to this podcast and our other podcast, Analyzing Avatar, 1 week ahead of its normal release. You can also support us in the normal ways by just continuing to listen. Or if you want to be more involved than that, but not as involved as paying, you can tell a friend, or you can sort of like and subscribe on whatever platform that you listen to us on. If you're on a podcast platform, an audio platform, you can usually review. And interacting with any of our stuff on any platform tells the algorithm TM, that you enjoy the content, and it makes it more likely to share it with others. That helps us out a great deal. But again, simply continuing to listen, we love you for that. So that's all anyone. That's as much as I can expect of anyone. Even that is more than I actually expect of people. I'm always surprised to discover people listen at all. So thank you very much for doing even that. With all that in mind, I think I've covered everything. Oh, if you have thoughts, head over to the YouTube channel, find the video for this very this very episode. You can put comments down below if you've got any thoughts on the Iron Giant yourself. You can also, of course, stick them on our Discord, which you get access to through the Patreon. Or you can email us, mail@nothingbutstatic.co.uk. Or there is the Twitter, but we genuinely don't really check that anymore. I have set up notifications, but I'll be honest with you, I've not seen one, so I don't know if that means no one has, or if I've just not noticed. Shall I have a look? Oh Christ, I don't even have access to it anymore. Oh, that's fun. Okay, well, it's gone. That's one way for it to have vanished. I'm logged out of the accounts.
I don't think. Well, I've never been logged in, but people would often tag us individually and stuff. But yeah, like you say, it's not a particularly used platform now.
Yeah. So anyway, that's everything. Thank you all very much for listening. Come back in a week's time for Pirates fun. That's for sure what we're doing for the next 3 weeks. We've yet to decide what we do with the last 2 episodes of this series, whether we turn the trilogy into a quadrilogy or if we go our own way. I don't know. I can't remember who gets that choice though. Is it me or you?
It's you, so it wouldn't be quadrilogy. Quadrilogy's 4, so it'd be whatever the 5 thing is.
Pentrilogy? That's 6.
Huh?
Because
it's you, which is really exciting because I would do it because I'm a bit of a completionist and I'm a bit like fuck it, but I think it's there's more jeopardy in a way because if the second 2, I reckon it's fairly certain that the 2 and 3 probably aren't going to be as good as Temple of Doom and the Last Crusade. So whether do you know what I mean? If we're a bit beaten up by it, whether you just whether we want to do something different. So it's you, which is because I think I would be like fuck it. So I think it's more interesting it being your choice. Because it's less certain. Whether
yeah. Because I am a glutton for punishment sometimes, but I do have a limit. Like if I could have bailed us out of the Harry Potter experiment midway through, I would have done. Do you know what I mean?
God.
Like what we'd committed and we were doing it, and my mental health was slowly deteriorating, but there was nothing I was able to do.
I can't remember if I said this, but my cousin fed back on that. He fed back 2 things. One, he thought that me getting around. I think I've said this on another podcast, but one, he thought that me getting around us saying in the books by saying in the version of Harry Potter with that's all subtitles didn't get enough of a reaction on the podcast. And it's a phrase.
Go on.
You got.
No, go on.
It's a phrase that my cousins still use to each other. And apparently, it came up last night, and my other cousin's wife was like, Adam literally used the words in the version of Harry Potter that's all subtitles the other day.
That's amazing. The thing is, I've got a thing where I'm just kind of if I stop at every joke, we never talk about movies and TV. And you're right, sometimes I make the wrong choice. Right. Sometimes I'll react and expand on a joke that maybe, isn't worthy of us taking 10 minutes to then divert through. But you don't always know it in the moment. But a lot of the time, I find if even if I find something very funny, if we've already had a lot of tangents, or I'm just looking to get out. Let's say, for example, we're watching a series of movies that's driving me insane. I just want it to be over.
Well, that was the other thing he said. The other thing he said was, I said, oh man, we really began to lose our minds with that. And he was like, oh, you could hear it. He was like, you could hear that you two were really struggling mentally with doing that. I was like, yeah, it was really hard.
And look, if anyone wants to check it out, if you want to witness us going mad while we tear apart the Harry Potter movies. I mean, I think that what's fun about that what I really like is that the first couple were pretty innocent and pretty, were fine, really. They got away with it when the books that they were adapting were shorter. There weren't as many problems, as we discover. So the first couple, it's like real gentle, like, there's a few things we don't like, but mostly this works. And then it just absolutely descends into madness. And the fact that anyone enjoys a Harry Potter movie past 4 or 5, because I think it was 5 was a different writer and felt like
5 I loved. 5 I ranked highest.
Yeah, right. 5 was good fun in the end. But after that, the fact that anyone likes any of those movies baffles me. Absolutely baffles me. And I'll never understand it, genuinely. But anyway, so check those out. They're in the feed. Rewind reviews. You're already here. So. Yeah. So that's everything for this week.
Check it all out there.
I'm going to hand it over to Chris, who ends these.
Yep, I'm Chris Billingham.
I'm Dan Doolan.
And this review has been rewound.